name is Joanne Abdo, and I am the coordinator for Croatia Fest. And today we are visiting the towns of Cle Elum and Roslyn. And we are here with David Franklin, a local historian who provides walking tours of Roslyn. And David, if you can tell us a little bit about this very famous mural behind me.
Sure. Back in the late 80s, Pipeline Productions was looking for a place to shoot the new TV show Northern Exposure. And they were talked into coming over to Roslyn. The first time they didn't make it because the pass was closed, but they persisted and got here in the snow. When they drove into town, they said within the first 5 minutes, this is it. This is where we want to shoot. So in the credits at the beginning of the Northern Exposure show, those of you who are Northern Exposure watchers know that you had the moose coming out of the street to my left here into sight. The camera was over there in the yard of Roslyn Yard, which didn't look quite the same now, but that's where the camera angle is. And you did not see behind the moose, making the moose move, 12-year-old boys with sections of cyclone fence herding the moose. And they got paid for it, and I mean, it doesn't get any better than that, getting paid to drive a moose. So they would bring the moose out, and the moose would have his moment of fame, the cameras would roll, and then the next episode would start. Roslyn at first had mixed feelings, I would say, about having that much of an outside presence here. Over time, most people realized that most of the Northern Exposure people were nice folks. They really did realize they're nice folks. In fact, Ed, you remember Ed Chigliak? Ed lived in the Oshada's house down here. He was in Sky's other bunk in Sky's bedroom. He just lived there. He's a pretty big name guy, but he just lived down in the Oshada's house. So very much, it was an unusually friendly, symbiotic, mutually beneficial relationship between a host town that started out being kind of reserved about it and a major TV show that became very successful.
Great. Well, shall we start our walking tour?
Sure,
Let's
you
go.
bet.
All right.
Cool. I'm Dave Franklin. I'm from Roslyn by transplant. I had the good fortune to meet the Osmanovich family pretty early in my stay here because my wife, best friend from childhood, is an Osmanovich. And that's the first Croatian family that I got to know well, which meant I inherited Nick and all 37 cousins and several generations that are within a few hundred meters of where we're standing right now. My interest in Roslyn started out in '68 when I first visited here. My brother and I got a hamburger and a brick. We walked outside and got in a conversation with a guy where there was no crosswalk painted then. We stood there for 35 minutes and talked. Nobody asked us to move. I said, this is the town I want to live in. That was '68. I didn't get to move over until 2001. Started doing the tours in Roslyn. This will be the 4th season because Roslyn is having a conversation that matters very much to Roslyn about what it's going to be. It's got an identity which is based on solid history of groups that have historic roots all over the planet, specifically in Eastern and Central Europe. And it's got this huge influx now of people who want to live here for whatever reason, because they can afford a second or third home. They really like it. They don't know exactly why in the first place, but Roslyn gets a hook in them. It does. They move here, they build a house here. Up on 3rd Street, there's a house that if they sell it, it'll be $2.5 million, okay? And so instead of a 960 square foot miner's house, that's the mix that Roslyn is working on. And that's what got me into this. So what I will do for the next few minutes is talk about a few stories from Roslyn's history based on the stories passed to me by Henderson in the first place, and then in primary cases by families that were here early in the beginning and are still here now. I've volunteered at the museum for 17 years now, maybe, Nick, something like that. Anyway, and so I've met people, they come in the museum and they say, who are you? That's the good thing about being in Roslyn. They don't know you, they say, who are you? Well, I married Judy Cole-Kleser, and she grew up with Nora Baker, who is an Osmanovich. And that, okay, now we can talk. It makes sense. After the rocky start of the explosions and some labor troubles, the mine got really going in the 1890s, and they needed a workforce, and they wanted a workforce that would be manageable, that wouldn't be too pushy, that they thought they could manipulate and control. So they started advertising in Eastern and Central Europe. We have copies of the ads in the museum. They're wonderful bilingual ads in Croatian and English, Italian and English, Polish and English. They're really great ads. It's in English, I can't read Croatian. In English it says, young man, your future lies in Roslyn, Washington. And just think, the young man who's reading this is sitting in rural Croatia, outside of Fuzina in Mirkopai, and he's never been any farther than Fuzina, right? Your future lies in Roslyn. That's the moon to him. That is the moon. That's a long way. It is inconceivably far. He's 15, 16, 17 years old, and his family is looking at him across the kitchen table, and they're saying, we think you can do this. And so maybe he likes the idea, and maybe he doesn't, but he gets a vote, but his vote doesn't control things necessarily because the family is strong. And finally they decide, yeah, we're going to try this. So the family takes him down to Dubrovnik, down on the Dalmatian coast, and they meet the American down there who's hiring for the mines in Roslyn, Washington. And the guy looks at him, talks to him a little bit, says, fine, you'll do. Put you in a rooming house here until we get a boat ready to go with a bunch of guys. Get a bunch of guys, put them on the boat, comes to Ellis Island, get off, go through Ellis Island. The railroad meets you there, works with you to get through the Ellis Island game, puts you on a train. The train takes off west, and 5, 6, 7, 8 days later, it pulls up by the weeping willow tree down here, where the train comes through Roslyn, Washington. Train's going to two places, Butte, Montana, for the guys who are going to work in copper, and coal in Roslyn. They get off the train in Roslyn, they're met. Within a day or two, they're in the mine swinging a pick. So in the mid-1890s, they're making $3.50 a day, $3.50 a day. If you are scrupulous with your money, careful with your money, you can live on that and save in 1895 if you don't drink it all up or gamble. So 5 years later, you write a letter home to Mama back in Mirkopai, and you say, Mom, I'm doing well in America. I'm living in a such and such a space, in a batch house or in a rooming house. Send me a bride. Send me a wife. Mom, this is your job. You're going to go find a bride for this matchless young man, maybe sight unseen. You're going to go around, you know the families in the town. You're going to find the family that has a daughter who's eligible, that you would want to be married to your son, who would want to marry your son, whose family would be willing to talk to you and send her to the moon, around the world. So that's a big leap. That's a very big jump. So she negotiates with families until she's got a bride. Then those families, maybe the two families, take her down to the port, and they look around for an older woman who's going to get on the boat so that she's got a security person to be with her. If they find one good, if they don't, oh well, she's going on the boat. Now when you say goodbye under those circumstances in 1895, it's not, I'll see you in 6 months. This is lifetime. This is lifetime. This is a big walk away. You may or may not see these people in this life again. So she gets on the boat, she comes over here, and the first writings, I have not been able to read them, but they're referred to by a guy, we have a manuscript in the museum by a guy named Ivo Lupic Vucic. He wrote early about how difficult life was for the immigrating women, how impossible that voyage was. And so I don't know if a book came out of that. He refers to it. He saw it in 1926. So that is part of the story, is how much those Croatian women went through getting to this place. They'd be met down here at the train station by their groom. Maybe they've never seen him before. Chances are pretty good they've never seen him. Within a day or two, they're married. Then they move into whatever quarters are available, and she begins the life of an immigrant bride of a coal miner in Roslyn, Washington, which means 7 to 13 children, maybe. Ultimately, a house with a yard, and she will plant every square inch of it to garden. She'll put some fruit trees in, preferably with maybe some apple seed or plum seed she brought from the old country smuggled in. Those trees are still here. We've got old trees here. Scarpellis have got trees in their yard down here that I don't know how they go back to Grecos, way back to Calabria. Anyway, so she knows how to pinch a penny, so she can raise a family on $3.50 a day. a growing family. Out of that comes this incredible dynamic immigrant community of Roslyn. Okay, we got to move up the street. In 1895, 1900, when you went to work for the mine, your benefit package was your wage. That was it. There were no benefits. So, if I'm a guy from the old country, whichever old country it is, I go drinking. I drink with guys who speak my language in the beginning, and we talk about it. One of the things we talk about is, how far does my wage go? I want to bring my family here. A high percentage of coal miners did bring their families, which is an amazing fact, at $3.50 a day. I think that's a very, very important fact. Anyway, so they would, amongst themselves, then organize fraternal organizations by the ethnicity they were identified with most closely. In fact, some of the guys would join 2 or 3 lodges covering bets, because that's going to be your pension and your medical coverage, or the pension for your widow in the event of your untimely demise. So they organized, and in either 1887 or shortly thereafter, the first Croatian Fraternal Union organized the David Starcevich Lodge. I think it was number 56 here.
Correct.
And number 56 Lodge had high level participation. They were the first fraternal organization to purchase a cemetery area from the railroad. Northern Pacific had contributed the land. Have you all been to the cemetery? That whole parcel, not everything that's there now, but a good portion of it. And in the beginning, there was just the old city cemetery. The Fraternal Union, the Croatian Fraternal Union, was the first to buy a chunk next to the old city for an ethnic-oriented cemetery. Starcevich 1. And Starcevich 1 is only the first. There's now Starcevich 2, and now Log and Laren took down timber in the last 2 weeks for Starcevich number 3. So it's still going. It's still going. And this is a very powerful time of year in Roslyn Cemetery, because families see each other that haven't seen each other for a long time. And so there are reunions and things going on that people didn't even know they planned or didn't plan. But the most remarkable immediate effect was the cemetery out of the fraternal lodges being created, and the Cle Elum Roslyn Benevolent Association, which built the clinic, which is that building right there, that very building, Redbird Cafe. That's the first clinic in Roslyn. And downstairs there were 2 docs, upstairs was a dentist. My dentist friend David Branch says the reason you put the dentist office upstairs is that if the patient's strong enough to make it up the stairs, he might be able to take what you're going to do to him. So I think that's probably rational. Anyway, that was funded by the workers, organized by the workers, and initially the workers hired the doctors. After a few years, the company figured out it was a pretty good thing, and they decided to get on board with that. So it became a joint enterprise. But the Roslyn, Cle Elum Roslyn Beneficial Association had a clinic here, a clinic in Ronald, and then the hospital ultimately in Cle Elum, which is renamed and reconstituted as Kittitas Valley Health. But this was the parent organization. So they not only had health care for the miner, but his family. So I submit to you that America could learn a little bit today from those coal miner cats. That they had some stuff figured out, how to prioritize pinch and a penny to provide whole care for the family. That's very amazing.
My name's John Cernick Jr.
And I'm Nick Henderson. And we're here to tell you about the Roslyn Coal Miners Memorial. It was originally conceived by the Roslyn Ronald Heritage Club because for some reason in 100 years we never got around to making any kind of a memorial to remember our coal miners like John here and put up some kind of information that people know how the town got started and what built the town.
It was all the foreign countries who come here, and Italians, Croatian, Polak, everything. Every breed. There was a mixture here, Heinz mixture, and they were all hard-working, very hard-working people. Because I worked with some of them in my school years, and they took care of you.
Okay, John was crowned King Cole last year on Labor Day weekend. Years ago, another thing we started was the Coal Miners Festival to honor our miners, and came up with the idea of a King Cole, so that one miner, would be picked for years of mining and what he did in the mine, to honor, just a simple honor. That's what built our town. There was these coal miners that went down underground, and some of the mines were a mile deep, and so they weren't just a little bit underground. They were way underground and dangerous work, and nobody says anything about the miners. So every year the Heritage Club picks a miner from the guys that worked either underground in the mines or above ground in the tipple buildings or maybe the machine shop, something like that, and honors him as King Cole, and he represents the Upper County in the coal industry. And just an honor, these guys really worked, and somebody has to acknowledge that. So we decided we would.
So
This is the portal from Number 9 Mine, which was located at Swiftwater Winery on the Suncadia Resort outside of Roslyn.
Yeah.
This is where the miners went underground and started their mining day and came out here.
And I'd sit. The cars would come out in two-man trips. One would be going down, and then one would come up empty, and then another one would start down. But we'd sit right there, probably right
Not too far.
where that mark. There's a slab back there, and we'd be on a trestle, and then they'd drop the 48 guys on one trip on one set of man cars, and the other set would have 48. And they'd start dropping it down here, and just to the side I went down on. And I was be sitting, and then when I went down the first time, we went through there, and I said, "This ain't bad." Well, when we dropped over that knuckle, you're just standing there. I mean, you standing on your head. I worked with a lot of them, there was Croatian, Italian, Englishman, everything, but they all took care of you. I mean, and they took care of each other. It wasn't like no rat race like now, like things are. It was probably like old country, I mean, and that's the way them guys were raised.
Again, I'm Nick Henderson, and we're sitting in the Roslyn Museum, and we'll get some good stories and some pictures, some artifacts here. I was a past president of the Roslyn Museum, and now I'm turning it over to Junior Cernick again.
I'm Junior, and I spent 3 summers of my high school deal in the mine on vacation, and that's how I got this job.
We go crisscross, we turn over John. He's older.
John Plesha. Again, my grandparents came from Delnica, and I had the fortune of going back there in 2003. Swam in the Adriatic, could see Croatia and Italy at the same time. Just had my heart surgery done, so I needed the salt water to keep me afloat. And it worked out well, but glad to be here. Promise not to lie too much.
I'm Braven Benzak. I'm actually a 50-50 plant here, actually. My dad's was Slovak, and my mother was Croatian, so most of on my dad's side moved away, but most of my mother's side of the family stayed here and actually stayed in Roslyn, so that's why I identify more probably with the Croatian side than the Slovak side.
Your turn or my turn?
We're going across, he said, so.
Oh, I'm Louis Osmanovich, and my parents came from the Lika area in Croatia. I think the nearest big town was Gospic, I think, but I'm not sure. No, not up in the Delta area, but that's the area that looked like Roslyn here. Anyway, my dad was in the mines. He came over, I think, around 1910. Anyway, there were 13 kids in our family, and I was the 13th one. Anyhow.
They found out what was causing it, so
Yeah,
that's why
yeah.
it was no more.
He said that's enough.
Yeah.
No, my mom moved upstairs at that time with the kids. The old man stayed downstairs.
In the basement.
I'm Fran, and I spent a lot of time with my grandma, and then we actually went to Delnica. It was where my family lives, my relatives, and this one thing I have to tell you, because it was so funny. I was in the kitchen of the house that we lived in while we were there, and it was a very old house, and outside toilets, and so anyway, I asked my mother. I said, I hear some kind of a I don't know. I says it's downstairs or something, and they said, yeah, it's a cow, and that's a cow. Boy,
Yeah.
I learned a lot of things there, you know, and
A lot of the houses had animals in the basement.
Yeah, that
when we
was-
were there too. Of course, they were gone then,
yeah.
and we sat in the basement and drank wine. But that's where
Yeah.
the cows and pigs used to be. Seriously, yeah.
Anyhow.
But they used to say when they came over here from Croatia that the terrain here, the country, looked like it did back in Croatia. And it is very similar.
Yeah.
And that's what they liked. They felt at home.
That's why
Yeah.
they came here.
Right,
Because it was very similar over
Very
there.
similar. My wife's grandfather came over and worked here and then called back for his girlfriend. And they told him that she got tired of waiting and she got married. They said, but don't worry about it, I'll send you the younger daughter. And she did, sent the younger daughter over. And they stayed married for how many years?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but if you would, half the families from Croatia, I think, it sounds like, moved here. The other half stayed there. So if the people that had the luxury of traveling back to the old country, it was just like here. Get
Yeah.
the same name, same families, everybody's
Yeah.
there. Half of them stayed, half of them came out here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was able to visit my mother's youngest sister. Gee, I forget what year now. It was 5, 6 years ago, and she lived in Fraternal, which is south of Zagreb, and shortly after I visited her, probably a couple of years, then she passed away. But I still have relatives over in Zagreb and throughout Croatia. There, maybe I'll get back there someday. Yeah. But you know what really surprised me was we were isolated here. We had our own community. We were a microcosm of where our parents came from.
Right.
And it was the work ethic.
Yep.
And what they considered was important to them. You know.
Hi, I'm Maria Adams. I'm the president of the Roslyn Ronald Cle Elum Heritage Club, and we are here at the Roslyn Eagles. They sponsored a lunch for our volunteers. We just finished cleaning the cemetery. We have an annual cleanup of volunteers, usually over 100 people. It's raining today. We got a little bit less. I think we're still a pretty good turnout here, as you can see, and it's hopping. We go through, because our Heritage Club one of our missions is to take care, preserve, maintain the cemeteries. Out of 27 historic cemeteries, only 2 are perpetual care. The rest are cared for by volunteers and lodges. So, and that's the historic part of the cemeteries. We also are in charge of the Coal Miners Memorial downtown Roslyn, and so that's kind of our charge as well. And then we do cultural events such as the Croatian picnic, which is coming up on Saturday, July 16th, and that's always a very fun event. And then we'll do, like, we have a King Cole ceremony that's Labor Day weekend. We usually do something in Memorial Day weekend that pertains to the cemetery. And so that's what our mission is. Sometimes we sell books and produce books as well, but it's really about preserving, maintaining, promoting the heritage and the history that's in our area.
So here we are in Cle Elum, Washington at the Cle Elum Bakery with Claudia and Ivan Osmanovic, and they're going to tell us a little bit about their business.
Thank you. Well, I'm Claudia. This is my husband, Ivan. The Cle Elum Bakery actually has a really long history. It was started in 1906 by an Italian immigrant family. And in the 40s, Ivan's dad, Nick Osmanovic, and his mom, Dorothy, purchased the bakery from the Pricos in 1947. And they ran it together. And as Ivan was only a year old when they purchased, and as he grew up, he worked in the bakery quite a bit. In 1965, when Ivan was just 18. Oh, that got me emotional. Anyway, his father passed, and he ended up taking over the bakery from his mom 3 years later. So at age 21, he's running a bakery. And really, did you have many bakers with you at that time?
No.
So Ivan did most all the baking, working nights, coming in at that time. You come in at midnight and work until what time?
11 o'clock, noon. Noon.
He would work very long days, eventually getting some more help in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
And then I came along and we fell in love with the bakery. We started a family, and now we're running the bakery together. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I think we're going to head on inside and talk to Ivan and his son Nick, and they're going to tell us a little bit about the history of the bakery. And let's head on in.
Awesome.
All right.
My name is Ivan Osmanovic, and this is my son Nick.
Hi.
And we run the Cle Elum Bakery here in Cle Elum, Washington. We're I'm second generation, he's third generation. My parents, my dad was born in 1916, and his parents, they moved to this area. The grandfather was a coal miner, that's why they came to Cle Elum and Roslyn. When they got off the train in Cle Elum, they rode a stagecoach to Roslyn. So I always thought, wow, that's cool, old-timey. Then my dad worked in several other bakeries. He got a job driving a bakery truck. Bakeries are always short of help, so pretty soon they had him inside doing bacon and cleaning pans and all that stuff that the young guys get to do. And he had the opportunity to buy this business in 1947. And I took it over from my parents in 68. Yeah, started working here when I was just little, in junior high, cleaning pans, and when I was little, they gave me a piece of dough, and I'd go try to make a pie out of it, and they would pretend to eat it later, you know. And,
so we start really early in the morning. Most days we get here at 2 o'clock. Some days, on busier days, it's 1 o'clock. And our donut only days, we get to sleep in and not come in until 4. So it's a very early lifestyle. When you come in, first thing you have to get dough on the mixer because dough needs time to rise, and as soon as dough is rising, you know, you're usually working with other dough, getting it on and off the mixer, and since we make everything fresh every day, you have to slot everything, so you put one dough on right away, and then you can even do some prep work while that's mixing, and then you let that dough rise, and then you've got to fit in other doughs like cookies until the dough you first mixed is ready to process, and then process that, and at some point you get another dough on the mixer, so well, that's raising your processing dough, and then so pretty much something's going on at every point, because if you're going to make everything fresh by the time we open at 7 o'clock, there can't really be any downtime.
Talk about the oven again and the history of the oven.
Okay, it was built in 1906. It was originally wood fired in the back underneath with long slabs of wood. It stays at 450 degrees all the time. At night we put the fire, we close the chimneys, then that holds the heat in. So it's always at 450 degrees. In the 1950s, it was converted from wood to an oil burner that blows a flame underneath in the firebox. We like a nice even heat. You have to get bread like we need it to be. We run steam into that oven, and that puts a crust on this bread. It's just we put the bread in. It takes usually an average of 30 minutes for it to get to a nice golden brown, and then we pull it out with the bread paddle, and it's good to go.
No trip to Cle Elum is complete without a stop to Glondo sausages. We're gonna go talk to Charlie Glondo. Come, let's take a look. Dobro jutro. Dobro.
Kako je tvoja žena, moje dice?
Dobro su.
This is my wife, Randy, and her maiden name was Starkovich, and I'm Charlie Glondo. My grandma's maiden name on my mom's side was Matovich. Okay, so not only are we in the retail business, but we're also in the wholesale business, and we are under federal inspection. We have a federal inspector here every day, and so there are restaurants and places that we sell to. So the shalunits and the kielbases are recipes from my Matovich grandpa's side, and then some of the other Italian recipes, the salami and the colon and all that, from my grandfather on my Italian side, and then some of the other ones I just picked up as I went along. So, but if we're under federal inspection here, so if the inspectors see how the old timers started making salami in the basement so they could throw the mold on it and then put it up in the attic of the house to finish it off, they'd have a heart attack, but nobody got sick, so it was probably better then than it is now, you know. But yeah, it's so that's where my recipes came from. But it's just, I gotta say, it's been a wonderful joy. And the greatest thing about it is we don't argue, you know, amongst our kids don't argue. They get along very good. Well, that's kind of hard sometimes to have a family business and do that. So my mother and I are really appreciative.
I'm from the Roslyn, Cle Elum area, and the Croatian American community there. And it's been an old community for that area. And most of the Croats from that area, practically all of them in fact, were from the Gorski Kotar area. And in Roslyn, especially Roslyn, the Croats were predominantly from the town of Merkopile. My dad came to Roslyn in 1903 when he was 12 years old. And my mother came after the First World War was over in 1920. And my dad was a coal miner for 51 years, and he first started working in the mines in New Mexico, in an extinct little town called Carthage. And he came back to the Roslyn area, I believe, probably in the early 1900s. And his mother had a boarding house at that time. And my mother came in 1920, and she came with a group of 11 ladies who the miners all paid their passage over. And there was, I think it's my dad's brother-in-law, that he was kind of, remember Fiddler on a Roof, Yenta, and he acted the part of Yenta. And of course my dad, I knew my mother because she had lived across the street from him. So that's how my mother came over. The Croats in the area were a very closely knit community. And Croatian was my first language. My brother, who was 10 years older than me, he couldn't speak a word of English when he went to first grade. And being that he was already indoctrinated into the English language, so I would speak English with him, but strictly Croatian with my parents. And as kids growing up, we were all friends, and we'd speak Croatian to each other, of course, a lot of times. And families would get together at picnics they'd have. Everybody, of course, would bring something. And as we grew up, of course, there used to be weekend dances, and the boys and girls would meet and get together there. The girls would be on one side of the hall, and the boys would be on the other side. And you'd go over and ask a girl to dance, and that's how I met my wife. And she was 100% Croatian also, and her mother was from Delnica. Her dad was born in Michigan, but her parents were from Gorski Kotar also. And so It was a lot of fun growing up. And just about all of the men were miners. My dad worked in the mines, coal mines, for 51 years. And the mines in the Cle Elum Roslyn area were unique in that they're very deep mines. And they're some of the most difficult mines anywhere in the world to work, because the height just about never exceeded 5.5 feet. So you always worked bent over. And I worked in the mines during college, my summer years. My first summer, the wages were $16 a day. And I remember the next summer they were $18, they were raised. But at that time, a Boeing mechanic only made $11 a day. So we were well paid, and we worked what they called an 8-hour shift, portal to portal. So from the time you went down into the mine until you came out, it was only 8 hours. And we had 20 minutes for lunch. I worked at the number 9 Northwestern Improvement Mine. And it is a very deep mine. And they said it was 1,500 feet under from the level of the ground, which seems excessive, I'm not sure. But the mines were very hard to work also, because they, not only were they, the height was only about 5.5 feet, but you had solid bedrock above. After high school, I went to college. I went to Washington State, and I was always a better student in the fall than I was in the spring. And I went on to dental school at Marquette University in Milwaukee, and my wife came back, became a dental hygienist, and then we were married my senior year in dental school, and we came back to her hometown, Renton, and I established my business there, and I've lived here in the Seattle area since 1957, and been part of the Croatian American community here. So it's been a good life, been great to have been a Croatian American.
Hello, my name is Joanne Abdo, and I'm the coordinator of Croatia Fest. We have traveled an hour and a half east of Seattle in the foothills of the Cascades to the wonderful city of Ronald, Washington. And we're here with Cheryl Brisky Maris and her husband Greg. And tell us what we're going to do today, Cheryl.
Okay, well, first off, we thought we would stop here and talk a little bit about how Ronald did get its name. And it was in 1885 that Ronald first got its name from Alexander Ronald, who was the superintendent of the Northwestern Improvement Company, or NWI. And so anyway, we would stop up here, then we will go up to the site of the number 3 mine. And there is also a trailhead for the coal mine trail that will lead from Ronald to Cle Elum. It follows the railroad grade. And then go to the Ronald School, where you will meet some Ronald Community Club members.
And I hear we're finishing up at the Croatian picnic today.
Yes.
So
Croatian
we'll hear a little
picnic.
more about that. How many years has the picnic been going on? Do you know?
Oh, I can't tell you. It's
many.
Quite a few. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But anyway, Greg and I both were born and raised here, and we We had our great-grandfathers, our grandfathers, fathers, everyone worked in the mines. And it's definitely our Croatian heritage has been strong. So, and we've been very proud of that.
Well, we're honored to be here today, and we are so looking forward to learning more about this part of Washington. It's just so beautiful here. The air is fresh, the sun is out. We're about to talk to some really amazing historians and again finish up the day at the Croatian picnic, which I'm really looking forward to. All right, off we go.
So we're standing at what we call the entrance to the number 3 mine site. We're actually standing on the railroad spur grade that took the coal from the mines from Ronald to Cle Elum, and then they went off on railroad cars on the main line to destinations all over the west. So this is now a coal mines recreational trail that connects Cle Elum, Roslyn, and Ronald for recreational use on that spur line, owned by and operated by the 3 government entities, Kittitas County, City of Cle Elum, and City of Roslyn. So this trail is 5.5 miles long. It's a slow grade downhill all the way to Cle Elum, and it has many interesting points along the way as far as historical sites, starting or ending here depending on which end you start the trail on. The number 3 mine and into Roslyn at the number 1 mine, and Roslyn's number 4 mine, and on down to Cle Elum. This over on our left here is the part of the foundation that where they actually loaded the cars up off of the mine. And then on our right is the foundation for the wash house where the miners all washed up after they came out of the mine so they could go home clean. They left their clothes here to be worn the next days, and at the end of the week they took their clothes home to be laundered.
I can remember my dad coming home even after washing in the wash house. He had a great eyeliner and mascara on. His eyes were still pretty black. But anyway, that being the foundation, to our left over here is where the tipple was. It closed in 1958, and in 1963 it burned down.
So this is the actual entrance to the number 3 mine. The U.S. Mining Service came in and filled it in the late 1990. But this is what's left of the actual entrance.
Here we are in front of the Ronald Grade School. This grade school was built in 1916 and burned that year, and then it was rebuilt in 1916. So 6 years ago, I guess it was, we celebrated our 100-year anniversary with a big party. And every year we try to have a fun party at the 4th of July as well. So this is the Ronald Community Club that has been formed to protect and preserve our buildings. I'm Cheryl Brisky-Maris, and a very strong Croatian heritage. My grandparents on both of my mother's side and my father's side were immigrants of Croatia from Lokve, Delnica, Merkapol, and Leach. So, and then my maternal grandfather was actually from Solčava, which is the Slovenian country.
So, I'm Greg Maris, and my grandfather, Gergo, came from Leech, immigrated from Leech.
Oh, I'm Carol Kettleson-Cernik. I'm Norwegian. I was married to a Croatian and have a half Croatian daughter. And her grandmother's maiden name was Starcevic, and there's a huge lot of Starceviches. And we still have the old Starcevic home here that's over 100 years old that we try to keep just for family members to enjoy. So, my daughter Shannon.
I'm Shannon Cernik, and I'm a fourth generation Croatian and Ronaldite. And my great grandmother came from, Starcevic came from Leech, and my great grandpa's side Cernik, I believe, came from Merkapol. On to you, Val.
And I'm Valerie Vlahovic Lunn, and I'm Croatian. And my grandfather started in the mines, I believe, in Alaska. I was up there for a funeral for one of my uncles, his sons, and we were staying at the Millennium Hotel. And Dick Watts, whom you may be familiar with, we were coming downstairs to breakfast, and he saw a picture of miners on the wall, and he says, "My gosh, that's Grandpa Vlahovic." So he took the picture off the wall and brought it down and had pictures made for all of us. And my grandmother, after my grandfather and Ronald had made enough money, sent for her to come over to the United States to be married to him. And her name was Veronica. And this is my brother here.
I'm Andy Vlahovic, and pretty much what she said. So. My grandpa did get hurt in the mines, though. He got caved in on, and he never worked in the mines again after that. And his son also, his name was Steve, or both were Steves, and he got caved in on too, and he didn't work in the mines again after that either.
This school was built in 1916, burnt down in 1916, but then they rebuilt that year and it was back in operation right away. It did house classrooms from 1 to 8th grade. Some of the classes did not have any students. Some had 1 or 2 in the class. Valerie and Greg and myself, we were 3 out of 5 that were in our 8th grade class. And well, actually 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, all the way through, we went to school together. And so anyway, in 1966, the school districts consolidated, and we then became a part of the Cle Elum Roslyn School District, which was a scary thing, coming from a class of just 5, 6 of us to a big class of up to 50, 60. Okay. As we, I think most of us, we were in this classroom, except for Andy and Shannon. Shannon left and went to North Bend.
Plus I was born too late.
You were born too late. Oh, sure, add that. But anyway, this was the 7th and 8th grade classroom, and yes, these desks were used when we were here. This was the kind of, we did not have the inkwell. We didn't have a bottle of ink. We had advanced to a pencil by that time. But anyway, as you look around, our initials could be found either on a desk or on a chalkboard. We were kind of, you know, fools' names, fools' places, appear in places. But anyway, yes, this is definitely what it was like back in the day when we were in school. The whole
and see,
field.
when I was in school, this was 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Oh, you had 6
because
at that
the
time.
5th grade teacher had just one class for some reason. I guess
maybe more
all
kids.
the mean kids were in 5th grade. But this was 6th, 7th, and 8th, and I think we had a total of 10 kids in here.
Oh.
So, and one teacher, and he taught all 3 classes. So by the time you were in 8th grade, or 6th grade, knew everything coming in 8th grade because we'd heard it twice. We graduated geniuses down here, I'll tell you.
Well, you know, I think we've all done quite well.
Oh, I think so.
I mean, we have. For coming from a small school like this, I think we've got a great foundation.
And also, it was so close because so many of the kids here went on to Central because it was a teacher's college back then, but it was expected from the kids because my sisters, went there, and I kind of went, and then people from here went on to Central, and there were so many teachers that came out of this little school when you think about it.
Yeah,
So
I was one of them.
It was close, yeah. Cheryl was one. She taught for what, 30 years?
Yeah.
And Shannon, you didn't go here.
And because, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Because we're talking about Croatian-ness, right? Because I didn't go to school here. My dad was a principal here. This is my mom, and we grew up here. We grew up. My dad was a principal over 60 miles away. We came back here. There's a strong, strong, strong draw to this place. So even though Dad and Mom moved over towards Seattle for the job and all that, we never stopped coming here. And I think about that, like speaking to people doing well and things. And when you learn about what makes people mentally unhealthy or join gangs, it's a lack of a sense of belonging. I'm going to cry, sorry, I'm the crier, we're criers in this group. But, and so growing up in a town that's not only a small town, but also with that ethnicity that was so important, because I'm Norwegian and Croatian, and my Croatian grandma was very strongly proud of her Croatian heritage, and so it gave you that sense of belonging to be Croatian. And we'd go to a restaurant, and she and the waitresses would speak in Croatian to each other, and people would pass in the street and they'd speak Croatian to each other. And even very recently, when I was at the Croatian picnic, I realized you can still pick up a little bit of an accent, even in many generations down that don't even speak Croatian. You can kind of see some of the features, and you can hear some of the speech patterns, and it makes you feel a sense of belonging. And that was really important, I think, growing up, because you did feel like we had a great family, but we also had a great small town community. It was very Mayberry growing up here. All the cousins, would come back also and be here. So we grew up just with this wonderful way of just playing outside and feeling safe. And then there was that other thread of the ethnicity. We took Croatian dance lessons downstairs in this school, and I have the Croatian traditional costume because my grandma had those made for us. And it just was it added a lot. It added a lot to life, and yet it wasn't exclusive either. It wasn't like we're Croatians and we're better than you and you can't come here. It was like, isn't this great? This is kind of our thing, but we can all do our things. Because there's a bunch of Italians and stuff here too.
There are.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we should tell another event that the Ronald Community Club does sponsor is a Ronald School reunion. So anybody that has gone to school in Ronald is invited, or actually now it's expanded because whoever has lived in Ronald, we have a reunion every 5 years, and people then, this has been a part of the museum-like thing. People love to come back to the classroom and see what it was like where they sat in the desk and so forth. So anyway, they would then sign their name, and that's one of the events. Sometimes they come through and just sign their name coming up from a funeral or wedding or whatever. But there's so many names on here that we're just never ever going to erase them, because some of them have been on there for a long time, and
people aren't here anymore.
And some of the people aren't
that
here,
are not here, right?
Yeah.
Actually.
What's
that?
Erasers.
Oh, yeah, I better hide the erasers.
My nephew came up to say hi and grab the eraser right away. We're like, stop, no erasing.
Yeah, and my cousin's name is on there, and she's been deceased for a long time. Lynn.
Oh, Lynn Gaspard, yeah, I don't know.
And that's her writing, Carol.
It is, I know.
Well, you guys, some of those are from the 80s. I mean, it says 83. That's actually from 83. So that's, it's been a long time.
So anyway, those are a lot of memories right there on
I think it's
the chalkboard.
And it's kind of proof. I mean, I guess maybe it's just everyone's desire to write on the chalkboard, but I think there's a definite strong draw here. I mean, when we have those reunions, and again, this grade school has been closed since 1963, 66. And people have moved on, have completely different lives, live across the country, and yet when we have the reunion, people come back from the East Coast, from Alaska. People in their 90s make the trek back here to visit a place they might have gone to school a couple years, because it was so special. So I think they just need to have that permanence, you know, on the wall.
Yeah.
I mean, we're so funny. We're crying over it. If you're not from here, you don't know. But I mean, this place has so much energy. It has so much beautiful energy because so much of our community has gone through so much together for hundreds of years. You know, it's a shared heritage. It's a shared sense of community. So the energy just stays here. It's just all the weddings, all the funerals, all the school kids, all the happy memories, some of the tragedies. One of the people, when I came here to do one of our things, said, I remember your dad, because he was principal, the day Kennedy was shot. You know, and I heard the sound of his footsteps running down the hallway and coming into the school to tell us what had happened. So those things were experienced here together by the people of this little town. And it just builds. So that's why we get all weepy-eyed.
And it's also really cool because we all went to school here, and so many people have their, you know, after their services or whatever, they come here and they have the dinner and they talk to the friends that come to their service. Well, my sister, you know, of course, she died last year. Her service was in the room where she went to 1st and 2nd grade. So you start off here and you kind of end here.
Yeah.
So
we're okay with that. Because we do all kinds of things in between, but this is home, very deeply home.
Yeah.
So
Shannon has put together this poem that we'll probably all have a few tears over. But anyway, it's Ronald.
So years and years and years ago, I'm not even sure how many years ago, I was leading an event here. And again, the events here are just very joyful and heartfelt, and after many years of them, you start walking away from them, appreciating them even more, because there's so many things that aren't like this. And one of those nights, I remember walking home and just having to write it down, how I felt. And so I mentioned it to Cheryl, and she said, oh, bring that. And so I found it today, and this is like the form it was in this morning. It's just terrible, I couldn't read the middle. So the middle's not here.
Well,
but it's just sort of a little recap of kind of what it feels like to be from here, and the fact that our from here-ness is kind of encapsulated in this school and gym. So I just called it the Ronald Hall.
Awesome.
So it says, okay, as children we danced here with kids or with grown-ups, spinning and twirling on the polished gym floor. As our grown-ups looked on, laughing and talking, sipping from beer cups and eating some more. Those who were dancing were stomping and twirling, singing and spilling and laughing aloud as the button box band played the rousing old polkas, Beer Barrel, She's Too Fat, pleasing the crowd. When time came for a slow one, there was not a dry eye, for they sang in the old country language that made grandmas cry. As grown-ups we stand now, sipping and laughing, watching our children continue to try to dance to the polkas and sing to the slow ones in old country language that makes grandmas cry. Some grandmas are gone now. Sorry. Though their memories are strong here, the next generation has taken their places. Many still dance, and the children among them bear a striking resemblance to their grandparents' faces. Croatians, Italians, Itches, and Edos were all of one family, those gathered here now. Though some have gone on and others have joined us, the bond is as strong as it was years ago. In decades to come, I know I'll return here to visit and dance and laugh with old friends. Then I'll be the grandma, my children the grown-ups, and the grandchildren dancing will be mine and my friends. There's nothing more heartfelt than small-town connections. How lucky we are to share in this bond. My hope that our children and those who will join them will love and remember and carry it on.